Hello everyone, as always I am Vlaspare Sokos. Many of you will recognize this. This is the Beretta PM12. 12, let's explore its history, its mechanics and how it works. Let's go. Here we are back in the studio to tell you a bit more about the history of the Beretta PM12. 12. Many people I talk to seem to think of the Beretta PM12 12 as a derivative of the Maybe 38. That is absolutely wrong. Actually, the only part they have in common that is compatible is the magazine. In fact, they use the exact same magazines. Actually, the technical solutions that would lead to the Beretta PM12 12 started even during World War II. An army engineer in Cremona, Giovanni Oliani, designed two submachine guns with a unique technical solution. For example, in my Losi video on Wikipedia, you'll find that information. The telescopic bolt, meaning a bolt whose mass extends beyond the beginning of the barrel, so around the barrel. To save space and shift weight forward, the Czechoslovaks first introduced it in 1948. This fantastic book, as always purchased with the funds you generously donate on platforms like TP or Patreon, corrected me on this information. I wasn't aware, in fact, of the detail that Giovanni Oliani, with only 14 examples of the G44, presented a submachine gun made of stamped sheet metal with a telescopic bolt. So, 4 years before the Czechoslovakian submachine gun. This technical solution of stamped sheet metal and the telescopic bolt. These are features that we will actually find in the PM12 12, and we won't find them there by chance. In fact, the first to talk about these Oliadi projects, because he had studied them firsthand, was Domenico Salsa. Domenico Salsa is the engineer who created the PM12 12. So he was very familiar with this concept of making a weapon out of stamped sheet metal with a telescopic bolt. The telescopic bolt has a number of advantages. It may be technically more difficult to manufacture in terms of milling and construction, but it makes the weapon shorter and shifts the weight of the bolt forward. This in practice actually helps a lot with controlling the weapon during automatic fire. Even though it remained at the prototype stage, the G44 was one of the most innovative submachine guns in a certain sense of World War II. Already in 1951, in fact, when the Italian army was still widely using the Moschetto Automatico Beretta, Domenico Salsa started working to design a submachine gun that could be a future replacement for the Moschetto Automatico Beretta. He then began a progressive development of a series of weapons where we can appreciate the evolution of the project that would eventually lead to the PM12. 12. The first of these weapons by Salsa would be the M6. Here, in a rare photo of the PM12 12, we can see the clear influence of Ogliani's weapon. As for the telescopic bolt, in fact, Beretta was already producing a carbine that used it. Actually, it was the .30 caliber M1 carbine, not to be mistaken for the American M1 carbine, also 30 caliber. In 1957, the Artillery Inspectorate of the Italian Army examined a series of weapons. They evaluated the Pistola Mitragliatrice, 10 at that time, and the Frankel F57 was preferred, the latter one. They didn't like the construction of the Pistola Mitragliatrice 10 very much. At that time, the Pistola Mitragliatrice 10 was basically just a metal tube with the magazine well welded underneath and the grip attached to the handle. It wasn't an easy task, but Beretta would then, at the end of the 1950s, go on to create one of the most beautiful, honestly, technically speaking, stamped parts ever made. We'll take a closer look at the entire frame of the Pistola Mitragliatrice 12. In fact, it's made from a single piece of sheet metal, then bent and shaped. The magazine, well, in fact, is a single piece, together with what we can call the circular tube, where the bolt moves, which is also part of the exact same piece. Sheet metal stamping. Weapons produced in Italy, in general, are not known for stamped sheet metal. Italy has never been famous for producing things made from stamped sheet metal. I want to emphasize again that the one on the Pistola Mitragliatrice 12 is among the best stamped sheet metal pieces ever made. This weapon became the Model 11 and after minor changes, eventually the submachine gun 12. He was intentionally not very interested. He still had a lot of MAB, and at that time he had just spent a lot of money on adopting the BM59, the FAL, another of Domenico Salsa's creations. However, the police and carabinieri were the ones who quickly loved the Pistola Mitragliatrice 12. The one we're looking at today, this Pistola Mitragliatrice 12, is one of those brand new demilitarized models that just arrived on the market. They've had some modifications. Since it can't fire from an open bolt, it only fires semi-automatic from a closed bolt. Furthermore, since it's a handgun, it doesn't have a stock. It's not very usable this way. We'll see that during the live fire test. But first, let's move the camera and get a closer look at the Beretta Pistola Mitragliatrice 12. Before we get into all the details of disassembly, don't forget two important things. I'm talking to you, especially police officers and carabinieri who use or have used this weapon on the job. First of all, this is a Pistola Mitragliatrice 12, not one of the very common Pistola Mitragliatrice 12S models used by law enforcement. In fact, the Pistola Mitragliatrice 12S models have significant differences. First and foremost, the operation of the safety and the fire selector. Secondly, the disassembly and some details you'll see inside will understandably be different from yours. Military automatic. This one, let's remember that being demilitarized, fires from a closed bolt and obviously only in semi-automatic, so it has had some modifications so that this is possible. But for the rest, it's identical in every way to a regular Pistola Mitragliatrice 12. We're obviously dealing with a blowback submachine gun, meaning there's nothing keeping the bolt closed. It's held in place, let's say, only by its own mass and inertia until the gas pressure drops. The magazines can be removed with this lever you see here in front. They're the same magazines as the Moschetto Automatico Beretta. Since the Italian army, after the war, still had a lot of MABs in use, and to be honest, they would keep using them for quite a long time, the compatibility of the magazines is quite obvious. Many people think of this weapon as an evolution of the Moschetto Automatico Beretta. But, as we've seen, mechanically speaking, except for the magazine, it actually has absolutely nothing to do with it. Other controls we see in this case are, first of all, the safety, this large safety that must be held down to operate the weapon. For the Pistola Mitragliatrice 12, unlike the 12S, there are two different selectors. One for the burst. This is obviously locked. By pressing it in this direction, you get the burst. By pushing it outwards, as it is actually locked. Right now we have single shot. And then we have the safety. Pushed out like this, it's on safe. Pressed in, it allows the weapon to fire. From the right side, some controls are duplicated to allow operation from both sides. On the left side, we also find the charging handle. The charging handle, of course, pulls the bolt back. By holding down the safety, we can pull the trigger. Normally, the bolt would go forward, but right now, since it's disassembled, we'll see it in a moment. We have a separate component that acts as a linear firing pin. I'm not sure how to explain it well. A sort of launched firing pin, even though it's actually a linear hammer. Because the firing pin of the weapon is a separate component. The really interesting thing from a construction point of view is this. As you can see, the magazine well is a single piece with the rest of the weapon. It's actually a gigantic piece of stamped sheet metal. Here, actually down here, we can clearly see the profile of the sheet metal. It's a fairly thick sheet metal, 2 mm. This isn't a very light weapon. This is one of the changes, for example, that the army wanted. The Pistola Mitragliatrice 10, as we've seen in history, for example, actually had this piece separate and then pretty much welded from the outside. They didn't like this solution. So actually, Beretta did this work on this stamped sheet metal element, which is actually a very complicated shape. Compliments to Beretta's technical skills. Because in a way, Italy might not be famous for producing stamped sheet metal components of this kind. Let's go, as always, to open the weapon. We push this little notch in, which will allow us to rotate. Let's push this cover. Now here, I repeat, the disassembly is a bit different from the military ones because we have a separate component that we call this. It could be called a linear hammer because this is what holds this element. As you can see, it was made quite handcrafted, to be honest. The sear holds it and releases it to hit the firing pin. A separate element, also custom made inside the weapon. From the front, we can pull this element, which is its spring, down and start to rotate it. From the front here. Which allows us to remove the bolt group. And the barrel! See the bolt? This is obviously the weapon's barrel. Here it is held by two, let's call them lugs, to this element, to the rest of the weapon's frame. As you can see, the mass of the bolt and the length of the bolt are very far forward. That is, Look at how much of the bolt we have forward here, beyond the actual face of the bolt itself. The concept of the telescoping bolt really taken to the maximum. Well, look here where it is, where the bolt actually is, where it feeds the ammunition. It does it here while it keeps going forward here. It's really the concept of the telescoping bolt. Brought to the extreme for a certain reason, but it gives the weapon a unique feel when firing because the bolt travel is relatively long but also very smooth. In some ways, this unbalanced mass forward in a certain sense really helps with the controllability of the weapon. So actually, as you can see, it's a very simple submachine gun. It takes lessons from World War II. Use as much sheet metal as possible to cut costs. Keep the parts simple, optimize the parts we have to make it a package that's easy to use, produce, and appreciate. And in fact, it's very, very much appreciated. You can see the same story being put back together here. Here we need to be careful because we have to catch the barrel with the tenons. Here we go, then here. Hold on, let's set it up. No, it didn't work there. There. You may have noticed some odd cuts in this video. Unfortunately, a problem prevented me from using all my footage. Let's go to the shooting range. Unfortunately, here too we'll have a partial shooting test, but let's take a look. First of all, here we are with the Pistola Mitragliatrice 12. As you can see, it's not the stock. Because it's a short weapon, we'll use it somewhat improperly, but that's the law in Italy. The magazines are the same as the Beretta automatic carbine, as we've seen. And obviously, now that you can have the 9 Luger in handguns, the 9x19 finally. I'd say it was about time. At least we can enjoy these guns. Let's load our rounds into the fantastic magazine. Double stack with alternating presentation, just like the MAB. So here too, since the Army had and will continue to use it for a long time, just like the Air Force and the Navy. In MAB, why create another magazine? If it works, if it works, it doesn't need to be fixed. This version fires from a closed bolt, while the original licensed Pistola Mitragliatrice 12 used an open bolt. We firmly press the safety here on the grip, we can insert the magazine and cock the weapon. And fire. I'll tell you, it has a kick. That's extremely unique. When it fires, really, really unique. In the sense that, unlike many other weapons of this kind, you can really feel. The bolt is heavy, which is typical for submachine guns. But you can really feel how it doesn't reach the end of its travel, meaning that when you shoot with a weapon, you absolutely feel the hit of the bolt reaching the end of its travel. So there's a first phase of recoil and then the hit. Here, it's really smooth. A single push from start to finish with the bolt's weight positioned far forward. You can also feel the torque, let's say the angular momentum, when it comes back forward, so it has 2 very distinct pushes. I can imagine, thanks to my experience with automatic weapons, shooting submachine guns in full auto mode, that this must be really enjoyable and very controllable. Let's load more rounds and try it again. Let's try another magazine. I have to say that here the grip safety isn't bothersome at all. Usually I'm someone who hates grip safeties, as you well know. It reminds me of the one on the Eckler & Koch P7, but unlike the Eckler & Koch P7, it's not really bothersome. Magazine fully inserted. Let's cock the weapon again and see. We have a malfunction, double feed. Unfortunately, the live fire test ends here. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope that despite a few shortcomings, you enjoyed it. If you enjoyed it, follow the link in the description to support me, leave a comment, or like to help the YouTube algorithm. See you next time.